Hi everybody, and greetings from the Capuchin Friary in Halson Street, just across from the National Shrine of St. Pio in Church Street. When I was growing up as a young lad, our family had a few addresses. I know this only too well these days when we have to complete the police vetting form to assist us with ministry. The number of places I've lived spills over into 2 or 3 pages, almost causing a timeout for the computer when I go to renew the police vetting forms, which we have to do every few years, as everybody does who's in ministry now, and that's best practice. I sometimes dislike being asked what part of Dublin I'm from, because growing up I lived in 4 or 5 different places, and so they say, what part of Dublin are you from? I have to go, well, was it Rialto, was it Kilnamanagh, was it Kimmage, was it Santry? But I and my 6 siblings, Kevin, Grania, David, Aoife, Lorna and Clodagh, were all born between the canals, the canals which run through the city. They say you're a real dub if you're born between the canals. And we were born in the hospital called the Coombe Hospital. I was baptised in the Church of the Holy Child, Whitehall, by Father, later Monsignor Tom Stack, now gone home to God. He later carried my baptismal candle in the offertory procession of my first Mass as a priest in 1997. I made my first Holy Communion in the school hall of St. Kevin's School, Kilnamanagh, in May 1977. The parish church hadn't been built yet. When we moved to the suburb of Rialto, in March 1982, I was confirmed by the then Archbishop of Dublin, Archbishop Ryan, in St. James's Church. Interestingly, St. James's Church is the famous church that is traditionally the beginning of the Camino of St. James, the Camino of Santiago. Boats used to leave that church and go down the river and out to the Irish Sea and make their way down to Spain. My family were Sunday Mass goers. We would have been known by the local clergy in each of the places we lived. Sometimes if we didn't make Mass in our local parish, we would all be put into the car. I would go to 12:45 Mass in High Street or 4 p.m. Mass in Mount Dargis, where the Passionists had their monastery. I vividly remember passing through town on Sunday evenings on the way to Granny Greta's house, my dad's mum's house, where we used to go swimming and learn how to swim in their swimming pool right behind the house where my dad grew up, and my grand's house. My dad would always identify some of the churches we passed by along the way. One church in particular we passed by would have a particular significance for me growing up later on, and as I found my way in life, St. Mary of the Angels, Church Street, the Capuchin Church. I remember on some Saturdays as a child going into Lourdes Grotto beside St. Catherine's Church on Meath Street to pray. We would usually visit the grotto on the way back from Frawley's to Nana's house on O'Curry Road, my mother's house. Lourdes Grotto in Meath Street is a place many Dubliners and many Liberties people hold dear. Years later, when I preached the Triduum in honour of the Mother of Good Counsel in John's Lane Church, the Augustinian church around the corner, I recall being brought there, and Lourdes Grotto and seeing Pope John Paul on that very street as he made his way through the city streets in 1979. It was a wonderful moment, something that I still have ingrained, not just in my mind, but in my heart. My dad, Enda, would have volunteered in many of the parishes that we lived in, especially in Kimmage, Rialto and Kilnamanagh. I remember he used to do sound for sports days, and he used to make reel-to-reel tapes to play music through the great tubular speakers suspended to the poles in those fields where the sports days were. Dad used to make recordings on the old reel-to-reel tape deck. He kept old tapes in a biscuit tin. There were all sorts of things on them, including music and songs and children talking and singing. Us children at birthday parties. It's weird and strange listening back to ourselves from the prism of time 30 years ago. He even kept the full live Johnny Cash concert, which he recorded when he was a sound man in the early 1960s in the National Stadium in Dublin. Last year, my brother sent an email to an RTE programme, and RTE came out and they digitised the concert because it was only one of its kind. And Johnny Cash was talking to the crowd and talking to the audience. and it made a lovely radio programme and a TV programme a couple of years ago. Lately it has been haunting to hear our voices again, our voices as kids at birthday parties, at gatherings. In an instant we're taken back in time to cartoons and songs and sayings from the late 1970s. It has also been great to hear the voices of some of my grandparents, now all gone home to God. My dad taped them at some family gatherings before I was born. As I recall, one of his recordings was his parents' silver wedding anniversary back in 1965, before I was born. We hear my granddad, who died in 1977. He's giving a speech thanking all who came for their kind gifts. To laughter, he says he looks forward to celebrating their golden jubilee in 1990. We all are used to seeing old movies, hearing old songs from many years ago. But when we hear the voices of your relatives coming at you, especially from a time before video or internet, it is very special indeed. And it's also at the same time quite sad. When I joined the Capuchin Order in 1987, we used to say the Rosary in the evenings in the Little Friary Church. Soon, like learning to drive, driving on our own for the first time, we were trusted to lead the prayers ourselves. Some of the lads weren't sure how to start the Rosary. As a former member of the Legion of Mary, I was the only one able to say the Rosary and know the different mysteries. However, I tended to always begin with the sorrowful mysteries, and I still do to this day. I automatically go to the sorrowful mysteries, probably because we used to meet as Junior Legion of Mary members on a Tuesday night in Benedicta House, where our Legion of Mary headquarters was at the time, for that part of Dublin. And on Tuesday nights we say the sorrowful mysteries. So I guess it's stuck to this day. As we now know, we say the joyful on Mondays and Saturdays, the sorrowful on Tuesdays and Fridays, the glorious mysteries on Wednesdays and Sundays, and the luminous mysteries, the mysteries of light, on Thursdays. But I still prefer the sorrowful mysteries for some reason. I find them very easy to pray, and I find it very easy to imagine Christ's passion. Even though we're in ordinary time now, we are beginning to anticipate in a few short weeks the beginning of Lent, when we will get more of a flavour and more of a sense of the sufferings of Jesus and the sacrifice Jesus made for us, for love of us. I just read that little piece from a little book I wrote a few years ago, Sending Positive Vibes, which is by Columba Books, columbabooks.com. And I look back over some of the things I wrote now, and they bring me back all the time to when I was a kid, when I was a young friar, when I was only starting out. Some would say I'm still a young fella. That's one of the wonderful things about being in the Capuchins. To somebody, you're always a young lad. So there's always an excuse for staying young. Have a lovely day. Thank you.